Hello everyone, my name is Ben Eady and I'm the Online Media Manager of ModernAnalyst.com, the premier online community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Instant Analytics, 1 Hour Practical Analytics. Today's featured speakers are Dipesh Patel and Richard Snow from Alteryx, and the webinar will last approximately 16 minutes including the Q&A session. So make sure you submit your questions in advance using the questions feature on the webinar software. I'd also like to say thank you to Alteryx Software for sponsoring this event, and this time I'll turn it over to Dipesh and Greg to get us started.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Very cool. And so I'm actually here. My name is Dipesh Patel. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Alteryx. And I've been here about 8 months. And just a little bit of my background, specializing in enterprise software, but I really wanted to share why I joined Alteryx. So I joined Alteryx because it's really focused on a part of the market that I think is often neglected by many other companies, which is the line of business data analyst. You're closest to where the big decisions are made for your enterprise, and so I really love the fact that Alteryx is laser focused on that. And today we'll show you how Alteryx can help you with Richard Snow. Richard, do you want to give people a little bit of your background?
Yeah, sure thing. So Richard Snow, I'm a sales engineer at Alteryx. I've been using the software for a few years now. Prior to working with Alteryx, working for the company, I used Alteryx to answer different types of business problems and answer different questions. So hopefully I'm able to use some of that expertise to kind of help you guys get a better understanding of how Alteryx can help you, put together some of these very easy to use and intuitive analytics.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks. Next. So this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of webinar than you may be used to. We actually want to make this as much hands-on as possible. In the reminders that we sent out for this webinar, you may have seen a link to download Alteryx. And if you haven't downloaded, that's still okay. Actually, you can go to alteryx.com/download. And even if you start it right now, by the end of the virtual lab, you should actually have the exe file on your desktop waiting to be installed on your machine. But the idea is this session is really going to be focused on hands-on. How do you get started with practical analytics? So this session will be recorded, and so if you haven't got it downloaded or want to go back and refer to some of what we're going to show you, especially in Richard's section, you can go ahead and do that as well. So the idea is it's really meant to be hands-on and less PowerPoint. So next. So this session is actually focused on you. So when I think of you, the data analyst, I'm really thinking of you as a problem solver, right? In a way, you can think of yourselves almost as information engineers, in that you take whatever data you can get and whatever tools you have available to you, and you use that to craft valuable analytics that your business needs to make decisions. And the key part of that is that you're providing that analysis, you're providing those analytics in the context of your business, not in the context of IT. So next. So what we see when we talk to data analysts, big enterprises, small enterprises, what are the 4 key things that hold people back? The first one is certainly getting access to data, and that is actually a big problem, especially if you're in a giant company and can't wait for your IT department to get you an ETL feed. So getting access to data is certainly a problem for a lot of our analysts. And the other thing that's a problem is when you have lots of different kinds of data, lots of different data sets, it can become really hard to keep everything straight. So the complexity of all that interaction is something that confounds or is a challenge for many data analysts. Number 2, oftentimes, you're left waiting, right? You're waiting for IT, you're waiting for licenses, you're waiting for people with specific expertise, and that often means that you have to be, you're basically in the back of the line. You're crowded out by big corporate initiatives, and I think we've all been there where we've been frustrated waiting to get the access, the enterprise experts that I need in order to get the decision that my boss needs to make now. Number 3, what we find is it's really a time. So we talk about analytic knowledge and tool capabilities, and there's certainly limitations in some of the tools. But a lot of it is, you've got your hands full, so you don't have a lot of time to go ahead and, learn arcane, programming languages or master multiple tool sets. There's definitely a time element to this, and we've all been frustrated because we've wanted to use new tools but just haven't had the time to learn them. And then number 4, it's really where the rubber meets the road, which is you need to present the results to your executives or other decision makers, and you often have to do it in a different variety of ways. Sometimes it could be PDF report, sometimes it could be Excel analysis, sometimes you could actually be delivering rich data sets to people who are using Tableau to do advanced data discovery and visualization. But the idea is that you're not just producing one kind of output for one kind of decision. You're really kind of under the gun to produce many different kinds of results in many different kinds of formats. Next. So that's what Alteryx Project Edition is really built to do. It's enabling you to build and iterate and deploy and refine your analytic workflows, analytic projects, without waiting for IT or without waiting for budget. So there's three key things that Project Edition can help deliver for you, which is, first of all, it can instantly create the analytics you need, but be able to do that with any of the data that's available. So that's really important, whether it's structured or unstructured on Hadoop, in Salesforce. You need access to data that you need access to make your decisions today. But once you have access, those analytic workflows are a way for you to actually put your thoughts on paper. As one of our analysts at our company, at our customer said, it's like having a blank canvas where you can kind of basically put your thoughts on paper to solve complex business challenges. The ability to build workflows rather than coding or becoming SQL jockeys is really, really nice. And number three, it's the ability to deliver, what your decision makers need. So in whatever format you want, but also be able to know that when you have an analytical workflow, you're not afraid that maybe you've missed a calculation on a formula or that you haven't got the data formatted correctly and maybe that threw off the calculations. You can be confident that you're delivering the results that are accurate and consumable by the decision makers. Next. So one of the things about Project Edition is it enables you to take advantage of the same tools. So you can see that we have a number of enterprise customers here. We have a lot of small customers as well. But what you'll have in common with them is the tools that you have in the Project Edition are the same tools that these people have available to them as well. So we chose not to restrict the tool capability or the type of data that goes into the Project Edition. We want to use the full capability that our current customers do. Okay. So the Alteryx solution is, well, first of all, as I mentioned before, we start with all the relevant data. So it could be in Cloudera and Teradata and the unified data architecture. It could be sitting on your desktop in Excel or in Salesforce. But the ability to give you all the relevant data is really the immediate starting point. And then we let you combine it. And as many of you know, some of us spend 60, 70, 80% of our time cleaning up and getting data ready for analysis. And that's a place that Alteryx Project Edition can really, really help you as well. So we allow you to combine, cleanse, and enhance your data to basically get to the starting point for your analytics. And optionally, we also allow you to enrich that data. So many of you may have access to data sets from Experian or TomTom. In today's session, we're going to use data from the Census 2010 data that was just made available a couple of years ago. But we're going to actually show you as well how to get to that data. But the idea is you combine your data, cleanse it, enhance it, enrich it, and then you're ready to do the analytics. And one of the things that's nice about the workflow that I mentioned, that you can rapidly design sophisticated analytics within the Project Edition. And the great thing about that is, unlike spreadsheets where you're manually keeping track of step by step by step by what you're doing, you'll visually be able to see the logical steps that you're taking to get to the analytic output. And when you get to that output, you can do that in a variety of different ways. So I mentioned, we are the only analytics platform that provides native output for Tableau, PDU format, but you can output to Excel. You can add to the PDF, to the analytics gallery. So we provide you with a variety of options with Project Edition to share those results and get those results out there and usable by your decision makers. Next. And here's where I turn over. So the reason I went fairly quickly over the first few slides is because we want this to be essentially a virtual lab. Turn it over to Richard Snow. He'll take you through the designer and help build the analytic workflows step by step. Richard?
Yeah, thanks, Dipesh. Yeah, so like Dipesh talked about, I'm going to actually show you the application and kind of walk through with you. If any of you have had the opportunity to go ahead and download it, we can kind of walk through how to interact with it together. We're going to build out a couple of different workflows. I've kind of broken out into part one and part two. Part one being, just kind of going back to the slide previously, doing more of that integration step. So taking different data sources and being able to integrate those together, and just to kind of quickly give you an overview of some of the tools that allow you to do that work, so you can start to get a sense for how to use our product to do some of this data integration step. Step number 2, we're going to focus on doing some more of the enrichment and the analytics step, which we'll see here in just a little bit. Okay, so like I talked about, step 1, we're going to take some different data sets together, and we're going to blend all of that together to kind of prepare a data set that we're going to then go and use further in a little bit. So we'll jump right into the demo, and if some of you are lucky enough to join a little bit early, you got a demo of my email as well, but at this point, I'll go ahead and demo the Alteryx application that we can take a look at. So right now I've brought up the Alteryx kind of designer here on my desktop. So if you were to have downloaded this previously, or if you're downloading it now, whenever you open up Alteryx for the first time, it will ask you to go ahead and register for a license for Project Edition, so that you'll be able to do that. But as soon as you get that license kind of set up and ready to go, you'll get full access to the application the same way that you see it here. So just to kind of give you an overview of what you're looking at, over here on the right is a kind of a canvas, or that working area that Dipesh talked about before. So this is where we're going to be building out our workflow to perform our particular job that we're interested in. So again, it's a visual workflow tool. We're going to be building out this kind of tool, or this process flow, by interacting with different tools across the top that you see here. So we'll be taking tools, dragging and dropping them onto the canvas, building out a workflow that will, basically pass data or do some work from tool to tool to tool. We're going to be making those connections. It's a visual workflow application that we're going to be interacting with. So as I mentioned, there are different tools across the top here that have different jobs. And above that, you'll actually see different tool categories, so that each one of the tools that we can interact with are rolled up into different categories, so that we can easily kind of find and decipher what they might want to be used for. So most of the time, we're going to be starting off a process. We're going to begin by bringing in some sort of data. So the way I can do that is by coming up to either my favorites tool set. This tool is also found inside the in-out. So basically, within the favorites toolkit, there are tools that are kind of the most used tools. So these are tools that I'm using, 75% of the time. So we can put them in our favorites so we can easily access them. But all of these tools are also located in their, appropriate tool category. So the first tool we're going to use, the input tool, you can find under favorites or under in-out. I'll take that input tool, and I'm going to drag and drop it here onto my canvas. Again, we're going to be building out this visual workflow, so each one of these tools or steps along the way are going to represent a particular action on the data. In this case, with the input tool, I want to connect to a data source that I want to do some sort of work on. So in here on the input tool, what I'd like to build with you today as a part of demonstrating this kind of ETL data blending step, and then also doing more of an analytics step, is bringing in data from 3 different sources of data that I have. To start off with, we're going to take a look at some transaction level data. We're also going to take a look at some customer data and some store data. I want to pull pieces of information from each one of those data sources, and then drop into doing more of a analytics step, where I'm going to append some data to that, and then perform some predictive analytics to try to understand the performance of my store locations based off of different key demographics within the area. So this first step, we're all going to be looking at taking my internal data sets and preparing that so I can start to do that secondary step of doing some analytics. So with this first input tool, I want to go ahead and input my transaction level data. So as I drag and drop this input tool into the canvas, we can see that this kind of configuration window opens up. This window over here to the left will, be different based off of whatever tool we've selected on. With the input tool, it's pretty simple. It's just asking for me to go ahead and navigate out to a data source. So what I'll do is I'll select on this kind of folder button, and in here it's going to open up a browser so I can go out and find the set of data that I'm interested in bringing in. One thing I do want to point out here is that Alteryx has the ability to read in lots of different data sources and data types. So we try to make it as open as possible, so that whatever data that you have and wherever it might reside, so that you can bring that within your workflow. And the reason that's really nice is because there's no need to transfer data sets from one data format to another. Alteryx will just be able to connect out to the data and whatever format it's in, and wherever it resides, to be able to access it. A little bit later, I'll talk to you more about making database connections as well. But for now, the data that I want to bring in is in a CSV file. So I'll just double-click on that file within the browse window. We'll see that as I make that data connection, this preview window pops open, and it's just going to give me a kind of small sample set of the data just so I can view this data, make sure that, hey, I'm bringing in what I'm interested in bringing in, and this is exactly what we're looking for. Within this data, we're going to have an ID field, which represents loyalty card kind of information. So what their, what loyalty card number am I looking at? The date of the transaction, the party ID is like a ticket number, so what transaction occurred. The member ID is going to be more of that loyalty card information, what date the transaction occurred, and then what product was purchased, and then how much was spent on the product. So now that I've brought this data in, step number 1, I've made a connection to a data source. Step number 2, I want to bring in a browse tool. So this browse tool is one of the simplest tools within the toolkit, but it's also one of the more powerful ones. It's going to allow me to view my data as this process as I'm building it out. So as opposed to maybe some other systems that you're used to using, or doing some sort of programming, it's kind of difficult to decipher what's going on between from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. And this browse tool makes it really easy for me to do that. So as I'm building out my process, we're going to use this browse tool to be able to see what happened along each step of the way, so that we can verify that that's what I was looking to occur, and also allow me to take a look at my data and view it as I'm building out my process. So for now, the first step that we've done here, we've connected to a data source, which is going to be some transaction level data, and I'm going to view it via the browse tool. So we've built our first process. It's something really simple. I want to look at my data. So now that I've built that, I can go ahead and execute it using this kind of play or run button up here. And we'll execute that. And as I do that, it's reaching out to that CSV file. It's bringing it to within Alteryx, and we'll see that we're going to view all of that data via this browse tool. So in here, in the browse tool, we can see that I have 1.6 million transaction records. And you saw that Alteryx had no problem reading that set of data. It was no chore for it to bring in that data. I'm dealing with just a regular laptop. I don't have any supercomputer or anything. So data volumes is something that Alteryx can handle very well. But in here, we can browse through this entire subset of data to take a look at what we're looking at if we desire. Now, as we bring in different data from different data sources, a lot of times there's going to need to be some different data quality work that needs to happen to it. So a lot of times we might receive a data set that is kind of dirty and needs to be cleaned. In this particular case, since I brought in a CSV file, the data came in all as string records, which isn't necessarily that great for dealing with things like numeric fields like this party ID and this price. So in that case, I would like to convert these data types to the appropriate data types so that I can perform additional functions downstream. So the types of tools that you might take a look at from a data preparation or data quality step is this category of tools called preparation. And within here, you're going to see there's lots of different tools to do different things on the data. So from filtering the data down to the subset of records that you're interested in. So I want only the records where the price is over a certain amount or under a certain amount, or where the description equals this, or that the date range is this. Things like that I could do via a filter tool. I can do a formula tool to create some calculated fields, which we'll see in a minute. You'll see lots of different tools in here to do different jobs on the data, getting unique records, sorting the data. The tool that I want to use for the job that I need right now is called the select tool. And if you hover over any one of the tools within Alteryx, you'll see this nice pop-up window will open up. We'll tell you more information about that tool and what its job is meant to do. So in this particular case, I want to rename some of my fields and also change their data types. So I'll just drag and drop that select tool onto the canvas. If I put that tool close enough to another tool, it will make those connections for me. But if you were to drag and drop the tool and not put it close enough to a tool, it won't know to make that connection for you. So if I needed to draw that connection, I would just take my cursor and I would put it on this tool until it makes a hand. So, and now I've got a hand, and then click and then drag it to the next tool that I want to make a connection to. So you'll see how that connection happens. And then when it turns into a hand, I can let go of that connection and it will make that for me. And now I want to connect this tool to the browse tool so I can view what I've done as a part of my process. And then once I've made that connection, I can move these tools around to kind of, make my flow as aesthetically pleasing as I'm interested in. So in here, via the select tool, what I'd like to do is a couple of things. First First of which is to change the data types on some of these things. So in here, this price field, I want that one to be a double. So it's possible that I could have decimals in there, so I'm going to make that a double. I also want to change this member ID to an integer. And then one thing I'd also like to do is to go ahead and rename this price field. So instead of calling it price, I want to call it spend. So all within the select tool, I'm able to change kind of field names and change data types and things like that. We'll execute this process again. Again, all we're doing here, connecting to a data source and renaming and changing some field types. So from an output perspective, it's going to look the same, but the metadata associated with this information has been modified. We can actually see that by taking a look at this tool, where we can see that now the member ID is an integer, and now we have a field called spend, and it's going to be a double. Okay, the next step as a part of this process is I'd like to do some transformation on the data. What I'd like to do is similar to what you might refer to as creating like a pivot table. I want to understand the amount of spending for each member ID. So I want to take that member ID piece of information, which is over here. We'll see that for some of the records, that member ID is going to be null, whereas with some of the other records, that member ID is going to be filled in. That's because there are people that shop my location that weren't necessarily loyalty card members. But what I'd like to do is for each one of those kind of unique member IDs, I want to get the total spending that those individuals have had based off of these transactions. The way I can do that is using the Summarize tool, which is under the Transform category. This Transform category will allow me to do things like cross-tabbing records and transposing records, and will also allow me to do summarizations. This is where I'm going to be able to find the maxes and mins and averages and things like that. I'll take the Summarize tool. I'll drag and drop it in here. Again, if I drop it between these connections here, it's going to put it in place for me. And in here, in order to configure this, what I'd like to do is go to Member ID. I want to add a group by member ID. And then under Spend, I would like to add a numeric sum. And in here, you can see all the other options that we have. We can do counts, min, maxes, like we talked about. Under numeric, you're going to see standard deviations, mean, medians, averages, things like that. Other data types like strings or spatial data types, we have other types of capabilities. But in here, let's just go ahead and sum that data. And you'll see that it's going to come up with a name for it for me called sum spend. In this case, I just want to go ahead and continue to call it spend. So I'm going to rename that field. We'll execute this process again, take a look at our work to this point, make sure that I didn't make any errors in my configurations. Take a look at this Browse tool. Okay, now I can see that I have all of these member IDs, including that null member ID, which means that they're not a member at all, and the amount of spending each one of those members have had historically with me. That's a valuable piece of information that I would like to use as a part of my process. So now I'm satisfied with this data input and the data that I've been able to derive from this data input. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and bring in my customer information and start to get some add data from my customer data in here as well. So again, we're taking a look at transactions. Now I'd like to take a look at my customer data. So how I can do that is, again, to go back to my input-output or my favorite tool category and bring in the input tool. And in here, I'm going to have the ability to bring in another data source. So all within this one workflow that we're building, I'm going to be able to connect out to different data sources so that I can bring in different layers of data to add to my analytic. And in here, I can point to, again, whatever data sources I want to. So within one workflow, I'm not tied down to using one data connection or one type of data connection. I can make all those different variety of data connections I can make all within one process. So in here, I would have the ability to, again, browse out to my file system and bring in, files of many different types. But in this case, my data is saved off in a database that I would like to get access to. The way I can do that is, again, via the same input tool. But instead of clicking on the folder here, I'm going to click this down arrow, and I'm going to select to make a database connection. And if I go to select on that, you'll see that I'm going to have the ability to make OLE and ODBC database connections, Oracle kind of bulk connection, and also Teradata bulk connections. So I can connect out to my SQL, my Oracle, my DB2, Netezza, Teradata, and so on and so forth. Lots of different database connections that we're certified with that you're going to be able to make. In here, I've already got a database connection that I have prepared that's to a local SQL database using OADB. So I'll go ahead and select to connect out to my local database here, my local SQL database. And as I make that connection, it's going to bring in some information for me to take a look at. So Alteryx wants to know what table on the database do you want to access. So if I want to, I can just come in here and select, hey, I want this table of information. You'll also have the ability within here, if you happen to know SQL, you can go into your SQL editor and select a SQL statement. But if you're anything like me, I don't know SQL very well. So if you'd like the ability to kind of easily build out SQL using like a visual workflow, you can do that as well. So this is a kind of if you're used to using Access, you may be used to seeing something like that from a query perspective. But in here, I would have the ability to bring multiple tables from my database and join those together and do different types of things here kind of simply via this visual query builder. But today, I'm actually primarily interested in just bringing in a table of data. So what I'll do is do that here. So I'm going to bring in this table of data, which is just going to have my customer information in it. So we'll make that connection out to the database, and Alteryx is going to make sure that we can see that and is going to kind of self-annotate here and tell me that we're going to be bringing in information from my test table and bringing in this table from this particular database. So now that I've made that data connection, again, I'm going to bring out a browse tool just so I can view what that data looks like and make sure that everything's fine and well with the data that I'm connecting to, and that I'm bringing in the data that I think I'm connecting to. So we'll make that database connection, and we'll see that we've got 5,000 customer records in here. Again, this is that loyalty card information that I was talking about before. So I now have each one of my customers. I know what store they shopped at, so what store that they have signed up for the loyalty card at, and I also have their member ID. So that member ID that I have on this set of data is actually also available on this set of data, so I can see where I can start to link up these two different data sets together. So the next tool I'll use as a part of this process is a join tool. And what this join tool is going to allow me to do is join different data sets together based off of common key fields. The join tool you can find within the favorites category, but you can also find it here within this join category. Doing a join or a standard join is one way of joining data together. We can also do fuzzy joins and also spatial joins to your data as well, but we won't talk about that today. Within the join tool, what I can do here is go ahead and let me make sure I've got that. Yeah, I can go ahead and select my key field that I want to do the joining based off of. In this case, my key field is going to be called member ID in both data sets. And I'm going to take a look at renaming any of the fields that might be duplicated. So in this particular case, I've got member ID coming from one set of the data, and I have a member ID on the other set of the data. So I'll just go ahead and deselect it. I don't need member ID to show up twice. I just will have it show up once. So I'll have the data associated with my one data input here, and then the data associated with my other data input over here. We'll go ahead and execute this. And now what we'll see is we're going to have my two different sets of data joined up together. Again, my transaction level information, which is going to have my, my spending by member ID. And now on the right-hand side, I'm going to have my member ID information, including the store that they shopped at. What I'd like to do with this set of data is do another data transformation in here. We won't go into a lot of, we've already been described how to use this tool, but what I'm going to do here is group by store ID. And I'm going to do a count of customers, so count of member ID. So I know how many loyalty card customers there are for this location. Then I'm also going to do a sum for spend. So now I'm going to know how much how many loyalty card customers do I have per store, and how much those loyalty card customers are spending at those stores as well. And we'll execute this real quick to take a look at the output. To verify that, again, that we've done everything appropriately here. Okay, we can see on the output now we're going to have by store, so I have 10 different stores. I have the count of loyalty card customers, and I have the amount of money that those loyalty card customers have spent at that location. Now, the next step I want to take here is, and I've just got 2 more things I wanted to show you as a part of this kind of data blending or data prep step. What I'd like to do is create a calculation. In this particular calculation, what I want to understand is for each one of these stores, how much I want to get the average spending per loyalty card customer. So the way we can do that is go into that data preparation tool. I referenced this formula tool previously, but this formula tool is what's going to allow me to do all kinds of different calculated fields. So formula or function libraries that you're used to using in Excel or other tools are the same types of capabilities you're going to have here. Then here I want to create a new field. I'm going to call it spending per customer. And in here, what I would like to do is take the spending, divide it by the count of loyalty card customers. We'll just execute this again to take a look at what our output's going to look like and make sure that I didn't make any errors there. Within that same formula tool, you're going to see the ability to do lots of other types of calculations and functions. So here we can see that we've got our output here. So now I have, for each one of my stores, the spending per customer. Within that same formula tool, we can take a look at the full function library, the ability to do conditional if statements, the ability to do mathematical functions, the ability to do string parsing, lots of different things that you're used to doing. All those capabilities are going to be wrapped up in here within this formula tool and taking a look at those functions within this function library. Okay, now the last step that I want to take here real quick is go ahead and bring in another data set. So right now I have, I'm satisfied with the data I got from my transaction data. I really like what I got from my customer data. So now I have, for each store, I've got the number of loyalty card customers, how much they spend, and therefore the spending per customer. What I'd like to do now is join on my store information. So I'll bring in an additional data set, which is going to have my store data in it. This one is going to be in a file on my file system, in this case in an Excel file. So I'll select that Excel file, and it'll give me the opportunity to select whatever tabs or sheets that I have on that Excel file. And in here, you're going to see that I'm going to have 10 different stores, and I'm going to have their address information along with their latitude and longitude. Now, it is possible that you may not have latitude and longitude appended to a set of data. But I'm going to share with you how you can get those latitude and longitude appended to the data. If you have an Alteryx Professional Edition, that's something that you're going to have that capability. But if you're downloading Project Edition from our website and you want to get latitude and longitude appended to a set of data, just real quickly, what you can do is go up to gallery.alteryx.com. And if you come in here for the first time, you'll go to sign in, and you can select to join now on the site. This is all free. In here, I'm going to, if you've downloaded Project Edition, you're going to have this login available to you already. But I'll type in my password, sign in, assuming I got it right. Okay, great. And in here, if you go to this public gallery, and under Search Apps, you type in geocode or start typing in geocode, you'll see that there's an app available out here called Alteryx Public Geocoding App. And if you select this and run this application, you're going to have the ability to upload a file and append latitude longitude based off of an address. So that is one way that you can get latitude longitude appended to your data that we provide out to you. The Alteryx Analytics Gallery is a web-based tool that we have out there that allows you to take applications like the one that we're building on the desktop today and publish it out for other people to be able to use and consume. So these applications that I build, or these workflows that I build here on the desktop, I can take and share them with people via this analytics gallery. But we can go into more detail, and would be the subject of another webinar to go into more detail about that. So in here, I've got my stores, I have my latitude, longitudes, and I'm going to finally just go ahead and join this up to the set of data that I have currently. So that now what I'll have is the same data that we are taking a look at. Let me configure this join tool. We're going to join based off of store ID in both cases. So now what I'm going to have is the data that we've been working with, but I'm also going to have my store information, but primarily the only thing I'm interested in from my store is going to be the latitude and longitude. So I'm going to deselect any fields that I'm not as interested in. Execute this process. Again, we're going to take our transaction data, We're going to do some summarization on that, take our customer data, do some additional summarizations and calculations, and then append that to our store information so that now I have, for each one of my 10 stores, I'm going to have the number of loyalty card customers, how much they spend, and therefore the spending per customer, and now a latitude, longitude. So this really concludes the first step of the process that I wanted to build out, doing that data blending in ETL. As a brief recap, as a part of the tools used in this first demo, we used an input tool to bring data into my analytic workflow or make those different database connections. We use a select tool, which is going to allow me to, rename fields or remove fields from a part of analysis or change those field types from a string to a numeric. Summarize, which is going to allow me to group data and get those mins, maxes, and averages. The browse tool, which just allows me to view my data as a part of a process. Again, think of that as a debugging tool, or allows you to view your data as you're building out your process and really confirming that you've got what you're looking at. Within Project Edition, you're going to be using that browse tool quite a bit. And using that browse tool is considered as a preview. So as you download that Project Edition, you'll see that whenever you go to click to execute, it'll ask, do you want to preview or do you want to run? If you're just viewing the data within a browse tool, that preview is going to be perfect for you. Whenever we do, in a later step, whenever we want to output data sets, you would be utilizing a run. We also are able to join different data sets together using a join tool. And finally, I don't know that we ended up using a filter tool, but a filter tool we did talk about. It's going to allow us to be able to split data off based off of some sort of condition. And we also use a formula tool, which allows us to create different calculations from the data using our function library. Okay, so that was step one, gathering my data from my different data sources, kind of getting it prepared in the format that I'm interested in using. The second step is going to be more focused on doing more of the analytics side of things. So taking this data that I've created, I want to enrich it with third-party data. In this particular case, I'm going to add census demographics and also some spatial information to the data, so we have those lat longs. And then I'm going to perform some predictive analytics on the data. So I'm going to take the data that I have. I'm going to make it spatially aware. So now that I have that latitude, longitude, I'm going to create a spatial object that we can take a look at on a map. From there, I'm going to draw a drive time radius around that location and pin demographics, excuse me, not a drive time radius, just a radius to the location and a pin demographics to that trade area. And then go into performing some predictive analysis. And what we're going to be looking at doing is, again, understanding these stores' performance based off of demographics within the area. So I would like to predict the spending per customer based off of the demographics within that area, which is what we will be looking at. So we'll jump right back into the demo, picking up where we left off previously. And I know in the interest of time, I probably have about, Dipesh, correct me if I'm wrong, but do I have about 10 more minutes that I can go, or am I running up a little bit shorter than that?
No, you've got about 10, 15 minutes. This slide will go through the end or more resource slides, and we can go through them pretty quickly.
Great, perfect, thanks. Okay, so back into Alteryx, where we left off here. So we brought in our different data sets to do our data blending and ETL step, and we now have some information that's going to tell me by store, I have the spending per customer, and I have the latitude, longitude. Let's go ahead and create, do the next step of doing some different analytics. So what I'd like to do again is take that latitude, longitude, and create a point with that. And the reason I want to create that point is because I want to understand where these stores are kind of geographically. But since I've got that latitude, longitude, again, you can get the latitude and longitude appended to data based off of an address via the Alteryx Analytics Gallery using the geocoding application. But if I have that latitude, longitude, and I want to create a point that I can see on a map, I can bring down this Create Points tool. Create Points is under the spatial tool set. You're going to see that there's a lot of different spatial tools that you can access and do different work with. We could spend a whole session just talking about the different spatial capabilities, but we're just going to touch on a couple of those here today. So I've brought in my Create Points tool. I'm going to have the data that I've created previously go into this Create Points tool. I need to tell it what my longitude and my latitude fields are. Since I called them lon and lat, it automatically found them for me. And after the data flows through that tool, we're going to take a look at a browse again. I told you that we're going to be using these browse tools quite a bit. So I can actually view where these points are on a map so that I can confirm that, I did indeed take my latitude, longitude, and created a point that is geo-aware. So in here, now we can see that same set of data we've been looking at, but now on the far right-hand side, you'll see that there's a new field that got created, which is called centroid, which just has this thing called a point inside of it. This point is basically a spatial object that allows us to view the data on a map. We'll also see that now that we've done this, there's a new tab available within the Browse tool that's called Map. I'll select on that map, and when you download the Project Edition, you're going to have base map layers that ship with the product, which is going to be the USGS North America. But on this map, now we can see that I've got my 10 locations, which are represented by these kind of red diamonds here, and I can view them on a map. We can see that my 10 different store locations are all within the greater Denver area, so that's the area that we're looking at. From here, what I'd like to do is create that trade area from those points. So what I want to do is draw a radius around these different points, and I can do that via this trade area tool. I'll drag and drop that in here. And within that tool, I just need to specify what I'm drawing that radius around, which is going to be the centroid object. I need to specify what size of radius I'd like to create. In this case, let's create a 2-mile radius, but if I wanted to, I could select a 1 to 2 mile radius, so that would be kind of think of that like a donut. I could select multiple mile radius in here, so there's lots of different options, but today let's just create a 2-mile radius. With Professional Edition, there's additional options to create drive time trade areas, but today with Project Edition, we're going to talk about creating mile radii, which is going to be basically a perfect circle around those locations. Let's execute this again so we can take a look at those trade areas within the Browse tool and view those on a map. Clicking on that Browse tool now, within the map, we can see that around each one of those 10 locations, we now have a nice 2-mile radius or circle around each one of those. The next step that I'd like to take is to understand more about that trade area. So now I have that geographic area and I know where it is and what it looks like. I want to understand more about that from a demographic perspective. So I want to append census level demographics to that data so I can get a better understanding about the characteristics of that trade area. So the way I can do that is flipping over here to the right. You're going to see a tool called, or a tool category called Demographic Analysis. And the tool I'll use here is called the Allocate Append, which is going to allow me to allocate or append demographic data to spatial objects. So in this case, I'm going to append demographics to that trade area. In here with Project Edition, you're going to get the ability to download and install U.S. Census data, U.S. Census 2010 data, which is what I'll select here. Under my spatial field, make sure you select the trade area and not the centroid. If you select the centroid, you're going to try to append demographics to a point, which isn't really possible. But if I append demographics to the trade area, that'll be better. And in here, you're going to see the ability to see the different data elements that I have available to me. In here, what we're going to take a look at is underneath the households and under U.S. Census, I want to bring in the total number of households and the average household size. Those are the two demographic pieces of information I want to bring in. You see in here, there's lots of other different types of information that you can get access to, for whatever type of demographic analysis that you're interested in doing. But these are the two that we're going to look at today. Along with, under the population category, I want to bring in a couple of other pieces of information. Those are going to include the percent female and the median age of population. If I click in here and scroll down to the bottom, we're going to see that there's a percent female and the median age of the total population. Now, the reason I'm selecting these particular demographic variables is because I think, or what I would like to do, is to test whether these particular demographics have any sort of relationship with that spending per customer. So perhaps, depending on the type of goods that I provide or sell, maybe the percentage of the population that's female has a positive or a negative relationship with the amount of spending per customer. Same thing with median age, and also, total households and average household size. So that's what I would like to understand. I kind of have a hypothesis that these variables will have a relationship or have an impact on my spending per customer. So the next step I'm going to take in here before we take a look at the result from a browse tool is going to back to that data preparation and using the select tool. And the reason I want to do that is just so I can rename some of these fields. So as the data comes out of the demographic tools, it's going to use its key. And the reason it's going to use its key as to creating a nice name for us is because the nice names are kind of long. So we'll see in here that these are under the description field. It's going to give us the name under the description, which will be households, U.S. Census, 2010 average household size. So it's just kind of long-winded. So using the select tool is going to give us the opportunity to rename it based off of whatever identifier that we're familiar with. So in here, what I'm just going to call this is average HH size. For the next one, it's total household, so I'm just going to call that HH. We have percent total female, so I'll just call it percent fem. Down here on this last one, median age, I'll just call it median age. So go ahead and execute this process. Again, so now what we're going to have is our stores. We're going to have the spending per customers for those stores. We're going to have a 2-mile radius around them, and we're going to have the demographics, the summary demographics within that 2-mile radius for each one of those stores. So take a look at that in the Browse tool. So here on the right, we now have those demographic pieces of information appended to my data: average household size, total number of households, the percent female, and the median age. So the last couple of steps in the process that I'm interested in doing here is, now that I have these different data assets together, again, internal data assets that I've pulled together doing different data blending and ETL steps, and also other kind of external content or analytics that I was able to perform within Alteryx, including, turning those lat longs into points, drawing those radii, and appending U.S. Census demographics to the data. I want to go ahead and do some predictive analytics on that data. So if I go over to the Predictive Tool Kit within Alteryx, you're going to see the ability to do lots of different types of predictive analytics. If predictive types of tools are of interest to you, Alteryx provides a lot of training around using some of these predictive tools. But what we've sought to do is make these predictive tools really easy to use for you. So instead of having to be, a predictive programmer, you should be pretty easy for you to use and configure via a nice, simple, easy-to-use graphical user interface. Just to show that to you, I'll take this linear regression tool, which is the type of predictive analysis that's appropriate for what I'm trying to understand. All I need to do is select a name for my own reference, so I'll just call it linear. Select my target variable, or what is it that I'm trying to predict, in this case, spending per customer, and then select the variables that I want to use to predict that spending per customer. In this case, it's going to be those demographic variables that we selected just a second ago. Let me add, this tool actually has 2 outputs. One output is going to be summary statistics. The other output is going to be the model object to be used in future tools. And I'll just, in the interest of time, go ahead and configure the next tool that I wanted to use. In this case, it's called Score. So this tool will create the regression algorithm for me, but then this tool here will actually append those scores to my data. So in here, I'll take the output of the model object going into that tool, and then also the data that went into the model. I'll go ahead and use that so I can append that score to that same original set of data. I'll put another browse tool. We can take a look at all these different browse tools here. Execute this. So we're bringing in our internal data sets. We're gathering some information that we're interested in there. We're doing some analytics by appending some spatial information and some demographics. And now, all within one tool, we're going to also append perform a linear regression analysis and append those scores to my data. On the linear regression, what we can do is take a look at our summary statistics, if that's something we're interested in taking a look at, so we can understand what variables went into the model, how significant each of the variables are, what their R-squareds are, things like that, the standard summary statistics that you're used to seeing. I want to use the score tool to go ahead and append the scores to my data, so that at the end, what I end up with is all the data that we've been looking at, including those demographic pieces of information, and now I have a predicted score on that data. So based off of those demographics, this is what we think the spending per customer should be. And finally, now that we've done our analytic and I'm satisfied with the results, I can view those results as many times as I want within these browse tools using a preview in Project Edition. But if I want to export these results and take them somewhere else, I can do that either by clicking the kind of export button up here, or I can go back to my input-output tools, use this output tool, select where I would like to save the data. So all the different data types that we talked about, we can input. I can output as well, including that Tableau data extract, which we talked about previously. So I'll just name it whatever I want to in whatever file format that I'm interested in outputting to. I could save that. And so now when I execute this process and I utilize a run, this will output a file to my file system that I'm interested in. You can also output to different data tables and things like that. And as Dipesh talked about, there's a whole reporting toolkit in here as well, so where we'd have the ability to create, PDF reports and different things like that. But we won't get into that today. Okay, so to recap really quickly, the tools that were used in here, we use the create points to turn those lat longs into points on a map, trade area tool to draw those 2-mile radii, allocate append to add demographics to my data, linear regression so that we could try to understand the relationship between those demographic variables and the amount of spending per customer, and also using the score tool to append those scores from the linear regression to my data. And at this point, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Dipesh to kind of quickly wrap things up.
Perfect. Thanks, Richard. That was awesome. So as we mentioned, this is meant to be hands-on, and we understand you may not be able to follow along completely step-by-step today, but this is going to be recorded and available to you for you to reference as you build these particular analytic workflows for yourself and for your own data. But we do have a number of resources available to help you get there. We understand that 87% of our customers get real business value out of Alteryx within a week. In fact, and so the upload process, as you showed you the workflow, the knowledge of how to use Alteryx is very intuitive, and you can build on it very rapidly. But to get started, you can go to our training page, and you can see the link here. There's a number of different training options available for you. You should start with the on-demand Project Edition training. We also have a number of live webinars. We've got them every 2 weeks, so it's extending out to September that you can attend, which will give you more in-depth detail of how to use the product. We also have a number of videos under our on-demand Professional Edition, and when you get to those, some of those are in 8.5, some of those may be in a prior version, but if you follow along, they actually all are very applicable to help you understand, for instance, how to do spatial analytics or how to do some of the advanced reporting. Next. The second place you can go to is the community. So we've got a community, alteryx.com/community. There's 2 places in particular that I think are going to be very helpful for you. The knowledge base tab is what you click on, and you can see all sorts of great reference documents, questions, things that a lot of you have in terms of how do I use Alteryx, or I want to do X, how do I do that? You can find a knowledge base. And if you find yourself like stuff, and you're like not quite sure, what we've done is actually introduced a new chat feature. So in the lower left-hand side, you have a live chat button. If you click on that, it'll ask you a little bit about information about yourself. You will click on the radio button that says, free Project Edition, and you'll be put in the queue, and we have that queue staffed by sales engineers like Richard from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's another option for you to ask questions. The other place you can also ask questions too, if you don't necessarily want to go to the community right away, is there's a lot of documentation inside of the product itself. So if you go under the product in the help menu, you can go look at the index and really go look at all the information that's right there within the project itself, and then go over to the community, check out the knowledge base, and then click on chat if you still have questions. Next. Another place that you can go if you have questions about, well, I wonder if I can use Alteryx to do this, or I need to do that. We have a library of live, essentially demonstrations. You can see the image here of that page, but this is a place where you can go to understand what are the range of things that you can actually do with Alteryx. So next. And this is a little bit of a build page. So Richard showed you in this example that we did, we used the TomTom data. But if you don't have access to that, you still have access to the USGS spatial data. So this is data available to you for free, along with the census data that Richard used in the live part of this session. So to get to both of these data sets, you go to Help, click on Alteryx Downloads. Next. With the page that you get to next, you actually have a button or a tab that looks like this, which is Alteryx Data Installs. So what you do is you click on that, and then you'll be taken to a page where it actually has some instructions on how to download, and you have access to both of those data sets. And there's an automatic installer so that once you download those data sets and you install them, they'll be usable from within the Alteryx Designer desktop. So it's a really easy way to get to these data sets. Just a little caution, the census data is detailed census data. And for those of you that don't know, the census itself uses Alteryx. And a lot of people who get the data itself on DVD are using a form of our product as well. So we're very, very tightly integrated with the census, which is one of the reasons we actually offer this data on our website as well. So, but it is a big download, 710 megabytes, but definitely worth it if you don't have access to other demographic data. So next. As I mentioned, today's session was meant to be a virtual lab, so rather than a lot of marketing messages, it's really a very practical how to get started with analytics. Now, you've had a number of questions from people about how do I do this if I don't have a lot of experience. The best way I can describe of how to get this started is, go to our demonstration page, gather your data together. The idea with Alteryx, and as Richard mentioned, there's a lot of ways you can put these workflows together, is just to jump in and get started. Figure out what questions you want to ask, and then from there, logically figure out what tool that what's the steps you need to do to get to that answer, and then you start building it on the canvas. So it's like I mentioned, one of our analysts over at the Tire Kingdom, one of the things that they love about it is you start with a blank canvas, and you can put your own thoughts down on there. And the great thing is you can iterate. Now, one thing that Richard mentioned that I want to just reiterate is, when you have Project Edition, you have two options when you hit that run button. There's the run, and then there's previews. So you have unlimited previews. You can use previews as many times to run your analytic flows and look at the results step by step using the browse tool. The output tool is what you would use when you use that and you add that to your flow. You have a number of outputs. That's 15 currently. You can get up to 65 more. But the idea is that outputs are then going to create full data sets. So whether it's Excel or Tableau or into your relational database, it's going to give you results that are shareable with others. So when you're building your analytic workflows of Project Edition, use browse and previews to really kind of hone your process step by step. And when you've got the answers that you think that you're going to want to share, that's when you would then go to the output tool and output to reports or output to databases or output to Excel files, etc. We've also had a couple other questions, and I'll just really, really quickly. Does Alteryx run on Apple? Well, the answer is we're actually certified. We work on Windows machines. That's what we recommend. If you have a Windows partition on your Apple, some of us here at Alteryx actually do run that on that Windows partition, that Windows virtual machine. But Alteryx is very much focused on Windows. And the second question I've gotten is, a lot of other kind of products where you can use this kind of functionality are limited in terms of the data or the size of the data. Is that the case? So Alteryx Project Edition, the answer is no. So you can use whatever data types you want. You can, as you saw, Richard had, over 1 million plus rows. If you have 10 million rows, there is no restriction in terms of data types or volumes when you're using Alteryx Project Edition. So next, I'm checking to see if there's any questions. Actually, I believe that Ben will actually talk about how you can get the recording. But this, as I mentioned, this webinar, this virtual lab, is being recorded and will be available to you as a reference if you want to get started and when you want to get started building your analytic workflows. So Ben, back to you.
Thank you, Richard and Napesh, for a very informative presentation. Thank you to everyone for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. I wanted to point out the webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at ModernAnalyst.com within a few days. This concludes today's event, and we hope you have a great day.